and welcome to Carib Scene. Now, firstly, we're going to talk a bit about pronunciation. From myself and a lot of people that I know, and a lot of people from other islands in the Caribbean, we typically say Caribbean. Some people who refer to it as the Caribbean, which is okay, like either pronunciation is fine, but it's just a matter of where you are in the Caribbean or where you are in the world that you will experience a different pronunciation. We also go by West Indies, especially when we talk about the game of cricket. The Caribbean is often seen as a geographical expression associated with a site, a sea, and several small islands. It is very imprecise and a bit difficult to define because, based on some commonalities, certain countries are included in the Caribbean that share a different geographical location. Example: Belize, Guyana, Colombia, just to name a few. In the past century, the multiple Caribbean islands that make up the West Indies were settled by a lot of Europeans, particularly the British, the Dutch, the French, the Portuguese, and the Spanish. As the plantations began to grow and the demand for workers increased, this led to the slave trade, where millions of Africans were brought to the region. This further added to the cultural diversity that we see today. On a lighter note, when we think or hear about the Caribbean, for the most part, we think of a joyful collection of islands, an explosion of colors, surrounded by beaches and soaked in rum. It is spread over 7,000 islands and cays. With so many islands, beaches, cultures, and flavors to choose from, this makes the Caribbean the perfect vacation paradise. The Caribbean is known predominantly for its sunny, tropical, beachy feel. However, they do experience heavy rain events, usually in short periods annually due to hurricanes or tropical storms, but sometimes it can happen repeatedly throughout a single year. So where in the world is it? The Caribbean is situated between North and South America and is sometimes claimed to be North American. However, some of the islands are surrounded by the Caribbean Sea, and some are bordering both the Caribbean Sea and the North Atlantic Ocean and surrounding coasts. The island arcs delineate the eastern and northern edges of the Caribbean Sea, forming what looks like a hook, as can be seen in the map. The Greater Antilles and the Lucayan Archipelago on the north, and the Lesser Antilles on the south and east, which includes the Leeward Antilles. Now, if we focus on the map, we can see that the Lucayan Archipelago, which comprises of the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos Islands, fall outside of this hook that we are considering the Caribbean islands, which goes to show that some of the islands that we consider part of the Caribbean do not necessarily fall within the Caribbean chain that forms this hook. But we'll talk a bit more about that and how it constitutes to the West Indies a bit later. The Caribbean has 34 island entities, which comprise of 13 independent nations and 21 territories. These are the 13 independent nations. The citizens of Aruba, Curacao, and St. Martin have full Dutch citizenship. There are still a few British overseas territories, which include Bermuda, Anguilla, Cayman Islands, British Virgin Islands, Montserrat, and Turks and Caicos. Guadeloupe and Martinique are French overseas regions and have held this title since 1946. They have full French citizenship. Some of those CARICOM states, which consider themselves part of the Caribbean but are not in the geographical location, are Guyana and Suriname. Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands are officially territories of the United States. If you come from a part of the world which plays or watches cricket, you may be wondering, How is the West Indies cricket team comprised of multiple countries? Well, I'll answer that in 2 points. But let's start back in 1492 when Christopher Columbus first arrived to the region, when he believed he had sailed to the Indies, as Asia at the time was known. They did not realize initially that this was a completely new part of the world. Now, fast forward to point number 2. Between 1958 and 1962, most of the British controlled Caribbean was integrated to form what was known as the West Indies Federation. This was in an attempt to create a single, unified future independent state, but this failed. I wouldn't get into too much detail about the countries and their history now, only because we will cover them in subsequent videos about the individual countries, but I will mention some noteworthy information. Haiti became the first Caribbean nation to gain independence from the European powers in 1804. Cuba gained independence in 1902, whereas Puerto Rico became an unincorporated territory of the United States, being the last of the Greater Antilles under colonial control. By their own rights, in the following years, these former British Caribbean colonies achieved independence. Let's talk about a tradition that still runs deep. Many of the islands in the Caribbean have their own unique festivals or celebrations annually. These include Trinidad's Carnival, Barbados' Crop Over, and Grenada's Jab Jab, to name a few. People locally and internationally look forward to donning costumes, oils, or paints and celebrating throughout the streets of the island, celebrating anything from past freedoms to seasons ending or beginning. Now here's a look at some of the interesting countries that we will be covering over the next few episodes. That's it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you've learned something new about the region. If there's anything that you would like me to elaborate on or explain in future videos, please feel free to let me know. I hope that you stay tuned to hear more about the other islands as I cover them individually over the next few weeks. Ciao!